We invest money in protecting nature, we'll earn very, very high financial returns.
Economists, bankers, investment funds and financiers are taking an interest in the environmental crisis. They say that they can protect the planet their way, with money. How much is the beach that you visit every year actually worth? How much for the forest that you love to walk in so much? What is the value of a plant, a mammal, an insect? Does this combination seem at all unnatural to you?
Sometimes I describe the challenge that we have as the economic invisibility of nature. What I mean by that is that most of what nature provides is not transacted in markets. Whether it's clean air or fresh water, or whether it's the pollination of bees for fruit trees. When did a bee ever send you an invoice?
Our economic system was created in a very different era. It was created hundreds of years ago when what was valuable, what was scarce, were capital and labor, right? So that's what we put a value on. All the natural resources, all the ecosystems, all the clean air, clean water, there was too much of that, and so we didn't put a value on it.
Having plenty of clean air, water and animal species is of no interest to the markets. They hate things that are abundant and free. The equation is beginning to change. Nature is the El Dorado of the 21st century. A new economic sector with promises of huge returns for investors. Banks, finance, corporations and states are attracted into it.
That's fundamental economic theory, supply and demand. The more there is supply of something, the less the price. The less the demand, the less the price. But the more the demand and the less the supply, the higher the price, right? And effectively right now, the price we're putting on the environment and on natural services is zero, effectively. But that's going to have to change as the supply of these natural resources continues to dwindle and the demand in the form of people continues to grow.
Los seres humanos existimos por millones de años, pero este proceso de destrucción de la naturaleza se ha dado solamente los últimos 150 años. En otras palabras, no son los seres humanos los que están destruyendo la naturaleza, es un sistema económico.
About 100 miles east of Los Angeles, there's a fly. Probably the most expensive fly in the world. Colton County underwent huge economic development. Business and industry gradually swallowed the sand dunes, while the so-called Delhi sandflower-loving fly had the sad honor of becoming the first American fly on the endangered species list. A bank saw an opportunity here, a mitigation bank. It realized that it could make money off these useless little sandflies. It bought a part of the fly's habitat, and then it did nothing, leaving the insect to live in peace while selling shares. If a business wants to develop a project on the land where the fly lives, it will find itself blocked by the state. But by buying shares, the entrepreneur can offset his impact by investing in the insect's protection and secures his right to develop his business. The bank has already made $20 million.
The free market tends to find out a good balance between adequate conservation, share of value, and allowing development to go forward.
In the United States, species protection is in the hands of these new bankers. Businesses, estate agents, road builders, anyone whose activity endangers animals has to pay these banks. They protect more than 1 million acres of land. They sell wetlands credits, cacti credits, prairie dog credits, even lizards credits. Wildlands is the biggest mitigation bank of the American West.
Our annual revenues exceed $40 million a year in mitigation sales. We mitigate for giant garter snake, for salmon, steelhead, delta smelt, split tail, Swenson hawk, for burrowing owl, for desert tortoise, elderberry longhorn beetle, tadpole shrimp, fairy shrimp, our customers are aware of the local solutions that we can provide. Now, these customers will come and say, I'm building a shopping center and I'm affecting vernal pools, or I'm affecting a burrowing owl. Do you have something that can help me offset my requirements? So we take a look at our inventory, we provide them a quotation for a solution, and then we barter those credits to them. It's a non-tangible transaction. When we give them a relief of their liability, it's a certificate of goodwill.
If you were to go on the speciesbanking.com, you would find probably about 700 different banks. And it's roughly between $2.5 to $3.5–4 billion a year that are in banking.
This market for endangered species is developing. Today, all these mitigation banks are listed. You want to know which one protects the Swainson's hawk, the tiger salamander, or the desert fox? With one click, the endangered species appear and the number of credits issued.
Va a haber especies de la biodiversidad que sean más lucrativas. Por lo tanto, van a tener mayor flujo de inversión. Mientras otras especies de plantas o animales que no sean tan atractivas van a tener menos flujo de inversión. Por lo tanto, estas van a ser privilegiadas, mientras que estas van a correr a desaparecer.
Natural capital is capital which nature created, not us. So the climate system is natural capital. There are trees, they're natural capital because they take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and produce oxygen. So biodiversity is a form of natural capital.
The clean water that we need, the healthy food that we need. Nature, through things like forests, provides us protection from storms or floods. And that's what I mean by nature's fortune. And so when we speak like academics, we call what nature does for us ecosystem services.
So nature has become a real business. It has its own capital and can offer its services to consumers.
There are certainly some people who feel uneasy about putting a price on nature. They feel that somehow nature is intrinsically invaluable, that bringing the profit motive and sort of associated greed to bear on natural phenomena is somehow just the wrong thing to be doing. I think that's short-sighted. Early societies deified what we now call natural capital. There was gods for rivers, gods for oceans, God for the sun. And these were all recognizing the importance of different types of natural capital. We don't deify things today, but we recognize their importance by putting dollar signs in front of them, by making them into capital assets. And that reflects the change in our society. Capital is seen as important today.
And the idea was to create a Bloomberg of environmental markets, where you had literally all the transaction data publicly, transparently, and credibly available, because that stimulates markets. So we created what we call the matrix, which really lays out the 24 different kinds of market instruments.
The matrix is the Bible of the markets for ecosystem services. Markets in biodiversity, water, carbon, green tourism, genetic resources. The ecosystem marketplace invented this matrix to show the potential for growth in these new Eldorados. For instance, 10% each year for biodiversity markets, 55% for carbon.
Tratar a la naturaleza como un capital, ¿no?, es una barbaridad. Porque quiere decir que se va a incorporar a la naturaleza, así como se incorpora a la tecnología o a las maquinarias, para, a su vez, utilizarlas para invertir y obtener más ganancia. Eso es lo que están diciendo. Están locos.
Environmental regulations are cut back or made more flexible. And this opens the door to the creation of market instruments supposed to save nature. This jungle in Borneo is worth some $34 million. The state conceded it to an investment fund that set up the world's largest mitigation bank. It intends to make a profit by offering its credits to customers such as pension funds and insurance companies.
Malawa Biobank is a 34,000 hectare forest reserve in Malaysian Borneo. And what's unique about this particular project is that it seeks to take a commercial approach rather than a charitable approach to conservation. It's trying to monetize the ecological value in the forest.
Borneo is the third largest island in the world. Its forest is almost 150 million years old, and a century ago it covered the entire island. Today, 2/3 of it have vanished. Because of logging and palm oil plantations. In just a few years, the island has been transformed into an ocean of monoculture. The ecological catastrophe is complete. At this rate, the last remaining orangutans will have disappeared by the end of the decade, just like the pygmy elephant and other species.
If Malawa has converts that ecological value to a monetary value, instead of being worth nothing and those banteng and orangutan being worth absolutely having no value, then the palm oil company next door would have to pay that price in order to be able to destroy it and develop it.
The Malua Bank sells its jungle credits to palm oil producers and any other food processing companies around the world that use the oil in their products. Will forcing those who destroy primary forests to pay for this destruction save the great apes?
Entonces, esta es una lógica muy perversa porque quiere decir que el que tiene plata puede comprar los bonos y destruir la naturaleza. Los certificados de biodiversidad son permisos para contaminar, son permisos para destruir la naturaleza. Por eso este mecanismo es perverso. En vez de preservar la naturaleza, genera exactamente lo contrario, porque el que tiene dinero no tiene problema. Compra estos certificados y con ello justifica su destrucción de la naturaleza.
The next wave of real financial gains could be environmental markets, for sure. With the bank, you look at both the risk and the opportunity around these issues. And I think all of them are recognizing that natural resources are very important. So the JP Morgan Chases, the Merrill Lynches, and Bank of America, all of these major banks, they're the institutions that invest in the businesses that are doing the projects that are having an effect on biodiversity, positive or negative. So they're a very important piece of our coalition.
When we look at the development of biodiversity markets, we find some very well-known actors, banks in particular. And what's curious and scary at the same time is that oftentimes these are the very same banks that were also very actively involved in the trading that led to the last large financial crisis. Banks, of course, don't do that because they have at the heart protection of nature. They do that because they see a business in this. They want to become the ones who provide the trading platforms.
You might even think they're the bad guys. Maybe they even have been the bad guys in the past. But sometimes they were the bad guys because they were making mistakes. They didn't know better. And see whether you can convert a bad guy or somebody who's just not paying attention into being an ally. Because if we can do that, we can get so much more done.
That was the boss of one of the biggest nature protection agencies in the US. His remarks are somewhat surprising, aren't they? The Nature Conservancy has almost 1 million members and protects millions of acres of land and marine areas around the world. But is this naivety or strategy?
I had a really fortunate experience when I worked at Goldman Sachs. I had been a mainstream investment banker for more than 20 years. And then my final position before I joined the Nature Conservancy was leading an environmental effort for the firm.
Having a CEO that has all of his experience coming from the world of banking, and corporate banking in particular, will continue to look for the solutions to the crisis where those solutions don't hurt the very sector that has made his career.
Economics is mere weaponry. The direction in which you shoot is an ethical choice. I have made that ethical choice to shoot in the right direction using the same weapon.
With his economic weapon, the ecologist banker has targeted the politicians.
Je crois que les États aujourd'hui sont en train de considérer que l'environnement ça coûte trop cher et que les politiques écologiques on verra plus tard. Donc, ils ont abandonné le souci écologique, ils n'ont pas abandonné le souci économique. Or, la crise écologique est une opportunité économique. Et les États mettent en place les outils pour transformer cette contrainte, qui peut coûter cher si on la considère seulement comme une contrainte, en opportunité économique pour les acteurs privés.
We want to have this partnership with the business sector because without that partnership we have practically no real chance to succeed.
Back in 1992, in that Earth Summit, there were mainly representatives from governments and a few from civil society, and they actually all thought that business was the reason for all our problems. Business was bad, business was damaging the environment, or whatever other negative implications there would be.
The World Business Council for Sustainable Development is a group of some 200 corporations, many of them actually with a very bad record on environmental issues like Rio Tinto, Shell, BP, etc. And it was created in 1992 with the goal of influencing the original Rio summit.
In 2 decades, multinational corporations have fashioned an effective lobby group.
I think we're slowly but certainly moving to a stage where it will become equal partners in a discussion. I mean, maybe I'm expressing a hope more than a reality today, but it's certainly a trend that I see happen. Only if we get business and governments as equal partners in this debate will we find the solutions and the scale to the solutions that the world needs.
The bet has paid off. At the last Earth Summit, the United Nations rolled out the red carpet for the private companies.
Rio + 20, il y avait plus de 2700 représentants du secteur privé. Il y avait le PDG d'Unilever, le PDG de Puma, il y avait Coca-Cola, Shell, Rio Tinto.
All these corporations met in a luxury hotel in Rio. Oil, chemical, steel giants, themselves regularly accused of practices harmful to the environment.
It means we do have to, in good management sense, explore risks and opportunities. We have to understand our ecosystem.
Just to bring that alive a little bit, this is the Nestle commitment to no deforestation. I think we were the first major company to make this kind of commitment.
And it was pretty clear to us the area that we really needed to think about was biodiversity and ecosystem.
Dow Chemical, c'est le producteur avec Monsanto de l'agent orange, qui est un défoliant qui a été utilisé par l'armée américaine pendant la guerre du Vietnam et qui a causé des milliers de cancers, de malformations à la naissance chez toutes les personnes qui ont été exposées à cet herbicide. Dow Chemical est aussi associé via le rachat d'une entreprise qui s'appelait Union Carbide en 2001 à la catastrophe de Bhopal.
The same companies that belong to this group, in their real daily activities, in their lobby towards government, are lobbying for exactly the opposite, are lobbying for policies that benefit their commercial interests, that don't affect their activities, that they don't need to make any structural change, that they can keep on having devastating impacts on communities, on the environment.
It only took 20 years for the banker, the politician, and the businessman, a symbolic trinity, to begin speaking in harmony about the environment.
We need a clean, more progressive economy a green economy.
An economy that is good for people, business, and the planet.
Pavan has been at the forefront of a community of economists, development experts, environmental experts, social science experts.
The United Nations was converted too, to a point that its representative for the environment named Pavan Sukhdev as its ambassador. Today, it's a banker who embodies environmental protection in the name of all the nations of the world.
Las Naciones Unidas en ese sentido se están convirtiendo en los promotores de la inversión privada en el planeta. Estoy muy en contra de ese rol que fundamentalmente se está desarrollando en el marco de las Naciones Unidas.
In our organization, which is Indigenous Peoples Organization, we're very concerned about this green economy label. We first thought, well, that sounds good, that the economists of the world are starting to appreciate, the greenness of the world. Green economy, it sounds good, but as we started to look at it, we started to see that it was all about privatization of nature.
Ecological NGOs need funds too, because protecting nature is expensive and donations are not enough. Some have joined forces with multinationals and signed partnership deals. They now have board members coming straight from the business sector. Many corporations have also recruited former employees of environmental NGOs. But in this game, who is influencing who?
Delegates from around the world gathered here by the hundreds to discuss climate change and its consequences. Global warming would be far more permanent.
In Japan in December 1997, a majority of countries signed the Kyoto Protocol. They accepted the risks brought by climate change and committed themselves to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions.
One leading theory is that it's caused when carbon dioxide and other man-made gases are released into the air and trap heat, much like a greenhouse.
Science was telling us that we had a problem with carbon emissions in the atmosphere, and we were starting to figure out the ways to solve those problems. And of course, forests, planting forests, maintaining forests, and landscapes, sustainable agricultural activity, is what people agreed was the cheapest and most effective way to abate, which is to pull that carbon out of the atmosphere. It really doesn't matter where it comes from or where it comes out of, so you can have a global trading platform for carbon that's perfect in terms of a global commodity market.
Kyoto put in place market mechanisms to reduce the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. The treaty set a global emissions limit, which could not be exceeded. Each industrialized nation that signed the treaty received a carbon quota. These credits are then distributed to the polluting industries. If Company A doesn't use all of its carbon credits, it can then sell them to Company B, which has exceeded its quota. Another possibility is for Company B to invest in clean energy sources in a less industrialized nation.
What we're trying to do there is essentially persuade people to take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and stabilize the climate. We're giving them a financial incentive to do that. And the offset system, which for example allows for offsets because of the growth of forests, is a way of rewarding people for providing more natural capital and generating ecosystem services from that.
That's why Western companies began investing in protecting nature or planting forests in developing nations. From small businesses to huge multinationals such as Microsoft, Disney, Air France, or even the giants of the oil industry.
To get the volumes and the amount of carbon that we have, you need to measure the trees, like diameters, heights, and then you get those values and feed them into the formula to get the carbon quantities that we have. 25.4.
Each ton of CO2 stored in the trees equals 1 carbon credit. Credits which the German company Global Woods offers to the international market.
Und damit ist es eben so, dass man als
Wenn man hier in Europa zu viel CO2 emittiert, kann man durch den Kauf solcher Zertifikate diesen sogenannten Kohlenstofffußabdruck kompensieren und einen aktiven und sehr nachhaltigen Beitrag dazu leisten, dass das Klima geschützt wird. Auf den 5000 Hektaren Fläche, auf denen wir bis jetzt Bäume gepflanzt haben in Uganda, werden ungefähr 1 Million Tonnen Kohlenstoff gebunden und das entspricht der Menge an CO2, die in Mitteleuropa 100.000 Leute in einem Jahr emittieren.
Y en última instancia, lo que se vende en el mercado son papeles. Papeles que dicen que si tú compras esto, tú estás comprando 20 toneladas de dióxido de carbono que ahora tú puedes emitir porque en algún lugar del mundo hay un bosque que está allí absorbiendo 20 toneladas de dióxido de carbono.
We really studied this and we became alarmed because the numbers weren't adding up. And it was just a false mechanism that was being set up that allows the polluters of the north to continue to expand the combustion of fossil fuels.
Batandise okuba nga bwe baba baagala nti tuveewo batandise okuleeta ate emmundu ate nga bwe bajja batugamba nti tuli baliraanwa baabwe naye ate muliraanwa wo omuleetera AK-47 ddala oyo abakyali muliraanwa wo
basiiba njala nga tibalidde omuntu osobola okusiiba enjala n'ogenda na ku ssomero n'oba obuuza na school fees w'okuzijja tewali naye batukiikirire tugende tulibe mu forest
bajje bulungi baleme tusiba kubanga ffe tetulina byakulwanyisa nti tuli babi oba tunakola obulabe bajje kyebaagala tube nga twogera mu buntu naye omuntu okumukwata n'omuteeka mukomera ate nga takyalima tyafune ssente kati aba agenda zijjawo.
In the past, this plantation land was used, often illegally, by the villagers. But in such a poor country, these people grew just enough to eat or to sell at market or to feed their cattle. But everything changed with the arrival of global woods. Vacancies for Forest Security Manager. The jobs are to ensure that a forest plantation stays free of damage caused by illegal grazing. Abilities and qualifications. Trained in policing or army skills, including martial arts.
Vorgesehen zum Pflanzen von Bäumen und nicht zum Anbau von Getreide oder um Kühe zu halten. Was wir aber machen, wir gehen da sehr proaktiv ran. Uns ist das bewusst, dass selbst so eine gute Sache wie Bäume pflanzen durchaus zu Konflikten führen kann. Aber wir gehen auf die Menschen zu.
These systems I'm talking about are starting to use our trees, our forests, especially in the global south, in developing countries, in the backyard of indigenous peoples who are brothers and sisters, to use it as far as this big carbon market scheme.
In order to protect the forests in various locations in Africa, the villagers have been expelled and their homes burnt to the ground. In Honduras, dozens of farmers have already died protesting against these sorts of expulsions.
Our people are literally dying. We are dying. It is a form of genocide. It is a form of genocide against our people.
But for now, nothing can stop the charge of the raging bull of Wall Street. It has barely a second thought for who it tramples underfoot when it finds new sectors in which to make money. Major banks and businesses have offered green bonds, a monetary product invented by the World Bank. They have already issued tens of billions of dollars worth of bonds in order, they say, to redirect finance to serve the environment. What is the guarantee that this so-called green finance will benefit the planet?
The likelihood that banks, traders will be developing the hardware and software of this new market in a way that benefits them rather than benefits nature will be the same as was the case in the financial crisis 2008-2009. These financial derivatives, financial products that were being traded very rapidly, were not helping house owners to safely finance their home. No, they were developed and used to increase the profits that banks could make.
Well, we've seen the consequences of financialization. We've seen the collapse of Wall Street. We are witnessing around the world this hungry money, which is only looking at how to make the next profit. Devastating economies, devastating ecosystems, devastating the planet. And for them to say that the reason the planet has been destroyed is because there wasn't a price, all we have to do is a map. Wherever there was a price, the minerals have been mined, the earth has been raped. Where there was reverence and respect, nature stands in her integrity. The evidence is very, very clear. Price has led to degradation and destruction. Pricing and financialization is a disease that we have to overcome. It's like a cancer on this planet and in the human mind.
But what is the connection between junk bonds, speculators and houses, and forests, insects and orangutans? In the past, when people wanted to buy a property, they went to their bank to ask for a loan. The bank would assess their ability to repay the loan. The financial crisis made everyone realize that loans were no longer just the domain of banks. In fact, household debts are transformed into securities, bought by investors, then split up and mixed in with other debts to create derivatives more or less risky, therefore more or less profitable, and finally put onto financial markets. One day, too many homeowners were unable to continue paying back their debts, triggering a flood of bankruptcies. The world then discovered that some investors had speculated on the inability of homeowners to repay their loans.
It's not that big a stretch of an imagination to use the same logic of dividing up the biodiversity credits and dividing up biodiversity in a sense and saying you can now speculate on the future date of extinction of that species.
On voit se développer des propositions importantes aux États-Unis pour développer de façon très très large tout un système de produits dérivés qui sont des produits d'assurance pour préserver des espèces, pour préserver des habitats. Moi, j'ai acheté auprès d'une compagnie d'assurance, d'un fonds financier, un titre qui me permet de m'assurer contre le risque de disparition, que je fasse disparaître cette espèce. Et ce titre-là, je peux le revendre. Et donc, il y a un marché secondaire qui ne porte pas sur l'objet initial. Que le dérivé soit sur un oiseau, soit sur du riz, soit sur du pétrole, ou soit sur une action, ça n'a aucune importance. La nature du support initial n'a pas d'importance. Ce qui est important, c'est le rendement à la fin. Donc, s'il y a du rendement possible, en spéculant sur la disparition d'une espèce, mais pourquoi pas?
Yes, securitizations are sometimes bad and they led to the financial debacle. Those were bad securitizations. But securitizations also can be very, very good. That doesn't mean there should be no securitizations. That means we must work harder. But just because there's a chance of something going wrong, or just because there's a chance that someone might not like it, should we stop and not do it? I think that would be a foolhardy mistake.
But if things were to go wrong, what would the consequences be this time around? Is there a level of acceptable risk? Investment funds are already proposing species portfolios. You could choose 50 orangutan, 30 fly, or 40 locust credits. The Amazon rainforest is already listed on the world's first green stock exchange.
Some people will say, well, but this is all conspiracy. This is not going to happen. This is not the purpose of nature accounting. We don't want that. But how will they prevent this kind of development once the methodologies are there to start speculating, to start trading biodiversity? You provide the instruments, and the use of those instruments will be out of your hands.